Hello, students. Welcome to School Success. We'll be proceeding with Chapter 1 of History When, Where, and How. In the last class, in the part 1 of this chapter, we covered what is history, why do we study the past, dates in history, period and periodization, and how do we study the past. Right? So, in today's class, we'll be studying sources of ancient Indian history. So, let's get started. So, in today's class, part 2 of the first chapter of history will cover sources of ancient Indian history. So, basically, we have grouped it into two parts. One is archaeological and another is literary. In the archaeological sources, we have artifacts, monuments, coins, and inscriptions. The literary sources will comprise of religious literature, secular literature, biographies, travelers' account, and chronicles. So, in the sources of ancient Indian history, we'll learn about our ancient past from two groups of sources. One is archaeological sources and another is literary sources. Right? So, archaeological sources, we have artifacts, monuments, coins, and inscriptions. And in literary sources, we will deal with religious literature, secular literature, biographics, travelers' account, and chronicles. So, let's learn more about archaeological sources. So, what are archaeological sources? So, these are remains of people, remains of people who lived in the past. So, archaeological sources are remains of people who lived in the past. Fine. So, what could be the examples? What could be the remains of peoples? They must have lived in some buildings. There must be some writings on stone walls. There could be some houses. There could be some pieces of metal plates. Could be some pots, some pans, monuments, coins, tools, jewelry, food remains, right? So all these things, the remains that we got out of the excavations, they basically, how are they helpful? They help in reconstructing, they help in reconstructing the past even when there is absence of written records. Even in the absence of written records. Fine. So now, हाँ जी भाभी, बस आधे घंटे तक 15 मिनट तक आने. ठीक ठीक ठीक. Okay. So now archaeological sources, they are divided into three groups. One is inscriptions and edicts. Inscriptions and edicts. Second is monuments. And third is coins, artifacts, and other objects. Fine. Now let's study about inscriptions and edicts. So what are inscriptions and edicts? These are the writings. Inscriptions are what and edicts are what? These are the writings. Writings, where are they found? They have been engraved on, where they had been engraved? Rocks, pillars, cave walls, walls of forts, palaces, temples, then clay and copper tablets. Right. So inscriptions and edicts, they are the writings engraved on rocks, pillars, cave walls, walls of forts, palaces and temples, and on clay and copper tablets. Now, what do they tell us? What do they tell? They tell us a number of things. First, name of the kings. Name of kings. They tell us period of reign. Then extent of their empires. Then some important events that took place during their reigns. So if I talk about, suppose, just an example, I talk about Ashoka, it will tell me during what to what years he was the king, how magnanimous was his empire, and what are the important events that used to take place at that time. There were some wars or some cultural events or something like that. Fine. So first thing is that they tell us about name of kings, period of the reign, extent of their empires, and important events that used to take place during their time. Fine. Second what they tell us is they provide information about society. What was the society of that time? What were the religious practices of that time? What were the cultural practices of the people? This is the second thing that was told through those inscriptions. Like inscriptions are reliable sources of history. They are reliable sources of history. Why? Because they come to us in their original form. They come to us in their original form, right? So study of these inscriptions is known as epigraphy. It is known as epigraphy. So what is the study of inscriptions known as? Study of the inscriptions is known as epigraphy. Fine. Okay. So I told you that in the sources of ancient history, we'll study about archaeological sources and literary sources. Fine. So archaeological sources are made up of artifacts, monuments, coins, inscriptions. So when I come to archaeological sources, I said that they are basically remains of people who lived in the past, and these could be the remains, right? So how did they help us? These sources, how did they help us? They helped us in reconstructing the past in the absence of the written records. In the absence of written records, right? So then we had studied about the various archaeological sources. So see, these are three types. These are three. First is inscriptions and edicts, then we have monuments, and then we have coins, artifacts, and other objects. So, in case of inscriptions, what are inscriptions? They are the writings. They have been engraved on certain places like rocks, pillars, cave walls, etc. And what do they tell us? They tell us number one, the names of the kings, period of their reign, extent of their empires, and important events of those times. And also, they told us about the society of that time, the religious practices they used to follow, the cultural practices of the peoples. So, these inscriptions, these were the reliable sources of history because they come to us in their original form. And the study of inscriptions is known as epigraphy. Fine. So, this was about inscriptions. So next that we study is inscriptions we have studied. Now we'll study monuments. So what are monuments? Monuments are old buildings of historic importance. Old buildings of historic importance. And how are they important? Because they give us information about what? They give information about people. What information about people they give us? That what has been their social life, their religious beliefs, and their cultures. And their culture. Fine. So old buildings of historical importance, they are known as monuments. What is the definition of monuments? These two lines. Old buildings of, number one, you have to write old buildings. Number two, they must carry some historical importance. So old buildings of historical importance are known as monuments. And why are they so important? Because they give information about people. What information is provided by them of people? Their social life, their religious beliefs, and their cultures, right? So excavations were done at Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and other nearby sites. Some excavations have been carried out at these places. So when these sites were excavated, what was proved? What was proved? So it came into picture that there was a great civilization known as Indus Valley Civilization. There was a great civilization called Indus Valley Civilization about 5,000 years ago. Fine. What other thing came up? First, to this we got to know. What else we got to know? That what we got to know, that the ruins of temples, forts, palaces, stupas, and some residential complexes, these are some common monuments. These are some common monuments that make the past interesting. So we got to know the ruins of temples, forts, palaces, stupas, and residential complexes. Right? Third thing is that these stupas and temples, they were built by these were built by Ashoka and the Gupta dynasty. Right? These stupas and temples built by Ashoka and Gupta dynasties, they are also important sources of history. Right? So in the monuments part, what have we studied? We studied that monuments are old buildings of historical importance, number one, and they give information about people. What information is provided about their social life, religious beliefs, and cultures? Then we also came to know that the excavations at Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and other nearby sites have proved that a large civilization existed in the Indus Valley about 5,000 years ago. Second, that ruins of temples, forts, palaces, stupas, residential complexes, they are some monuments that makes the past interesting. And third, the stupas and temples, those were built by Ashoka and Gupta dynasty, are important sources of history. Right? So this is about monuments. So we have done inscriptions and edicts. This is done. We have also done monuments. Now let's check coins, artifacts, and other objects. Now let's come to coins, artifacts, and other objects. Archaeologists, they found large number of objects. They found large number of objects. Which type of objects they found? They found, as we have already done, they found coins, they found tools, they found weapons, pots, statues, seals, paintings, jewelry. So the archaeologists found a large number of objects such as coins, tools, weapons, pots, statues, seals, paintings, and jewelry. And these belonged to all these things, they belonged to different periods of history. They belonged to different periods of history. Now, what is the information provided by them? So, they provide valuable information about what? About culture and civilization of the past. They provide valuable information about the culture and civilization of the past. Fine. So now there is one important term which is known as numismatics. Numismatics. So what is this? Numismatics is basically study of coins. So the study of coins is called numismatics. And why are coins important? Why coins are important? Why are they so important source of information? Because why? Because they help in determining they help in determining what dates of several dynasties. They help in determining dates of several dynasties. So they help us in determining dates of several dynasties. Number one, they also tell us about the religious and cultural practices of the people who issued them. Who issued them, right? And third important thing is that they provide information on the kinds of metals used in the period. So why coins are important? Number one, they provided us with the dates of several dynasties. Number two, they tell us about the religious and cultural practices of that time. Religious and cultural practices of that time, and about the metals that were used those days. So for these three reasons, coins are important. The study of coins was important, right? I hope this is clear. Let's come to artifacts now. So what are artifacts? Artifacts are basically works of art. Works of art. Who made them? Humans. Made by humans. What type of work are called artifacts? Like pottery, like statues, like tools, ornaments. So these are known as artifacts. Fine. So artifacts are the works of art made by humans, such as pottery, statues, tools, and ornaments. Now, what is the importance of artifacts? Why were they studied? What is the importance? Number one, they give us lot of information about the cultural life of people, cultural life of people of past. This is the first thing why they were important, why we studied them, right? And secondly, we found specimens of sculpture at Takshila. Specimens of sculpture at Takshila. It belonged to the period of Kanishka. It belonged to the period of Kanishka. And what did it depicted? Threw light on the beauty of Gandhara school of art and its influence on Indian art. Right? So when I'm talking about artifacts, I said that artifacts means works of art made by humans, such as pottery, statues, tools, and ornaments. And they give us a lot of information about the cultural life of the people of the past. And we found some specimens of sculpture. Where do we find that? We found that at Takshila. We found it at Akshila. At what period it belonged to? It belonged to the period of Kanishka. And what did it tell us? It threw light on the beauty of what? Beauty of Gandhara school of art and its influence on the Indian art. Right? So this was about archaeological sources. So we covered in the archaeological sources, we talked about archaeological sources. In the archaeological sources, we covered number one about the inscriptions and edicts. In inscriptions and edicts, we studied that these are the writings. These are the writings which has been engraved on rocks, pillars, and all those things. What do they tell us? They tell us three things. First thing, that they give information about great kings, queens, the period of their reign, the extent of their empires, the important events that took place. Second, they told us about the society. They told us about the religious and cultural practices at that time. And third, we said that these inscriptions, they are very reliable sources of history because they came to us in the original form. And we also discussed that study of inscriptions is known as epigraphy. Study of inscriptions is known as epigraphy. Fine. So in the archaeological sources, the second thing that we started was what? It was monuments. And we discussed that monuments are old buildings of historical importance and they give information about people, their social life, religious beliefs, and cultures. Right? Then we discussed that there were excavations at Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and other sites, and they prove that there was once 5,000 years ago there was a great civilization that existed in the Indus Valley, which was then named as Indus Valley Civilization. And then we also came to know in the monument section only that there were ruins of temples and many other buildings, forts, palaces, stupas, right? So that made the past interesting. And thirdly, we discussed that the stupas and temples, those were built by Ashoka and Gupta dynasty, and they are also important sources of history. The third thing that in the archaeological sources was coins, artifacts, and other objects. Right, so in the coins section, uh, we studied that the study of the coins is known as numismatics. Study of the coins is known as numismatics. And why do we study that? Because they help us in determining the dates of several dynasties. They also tell us about the religious and cultural uh, practices of the people who issue them, and they also provide us the information of the kind of metals that were prevalent at that time, right? So this was about coins. Now then we started about the artifacts. So artifact means works of art made by humans such as pottery, statues, tools, and ornaments. So, what do they tell us? They give us a lot of information about the cultural life of people in the past, and the specimens of a sculpture has been found where? At Takshila of Kanishka period, right? And they throw light on what? On Gandhara school of art and its influence on the Indian art, right? This is what we studied in the archaeological sources. Let's come to literary sources. So, in the literary sources, we'll study about religious literature. We'll also study about secular literature. We'll study about biographies. We'll study about travelers' accounts. And last but not the least, chronicles. Fine, these are the literary sources. So, in the literary sources, they include all kind of literature, right? So, when I talk about literary sources, they include all kinds of literature like long and short literature, written literature, oral literature. So, all kinds of literature are studied here. The most ancient form of writing is cuneiform. So, what is cuneiform? This was basically most ancient form of writing, right? And what was it? Basically, it is wedge shaped marks made on clay tablets. Wedge shaped marks made on clay, clay tablets. So, therefore, humans developed different types of scripts. Like uh, there were manuscripts. I'm talking about different forms of scripts. One was manuscripts. Now, what was that? So, these were handwritten records wherein the people recorded events and memories by hand. And where were they written? They were written on rocks, they were written on parchments, palm leaves, bark of birch trees, clay tablets, and then later on paper also. Right? So these are the manuscripts. And other forms of literary sources, one was like manuscripts. Other forms of literary sources that were available to historians was books. Then there were religious texts. Then there was account of foreign travelers, and then there was biographies, right? Even oral history, that is also considered as a record. So literary sources, we have manuscripts, then books, religious texts, accounts of foreign travelers, biographies, and even your oral history. So these all formed literary sources. Mainly, the literary sources, they are of two types. We divide them mainly into two types. One is religious and another is secular. Fine. So now let's talk about the religious sources, religious literature. So when I talk about religious literature, what I mean to say is that the writings are religious in context and theme, right? So when the writings, they are religious in context and theme, those are called religious sources, right? So classify them into we can classify them into number one, Vedic literature. This is a religious source. What is Vedic literature? It composes of four Vedas. What are the four Vedas? Rig Ved, we have Sam Ved, we have Yajur Ved, and we have Atharva Veda, right? Then we talk about two epics. Which two epics we talk about? Ramayana and Mahabharata. Ramayana and Mahabharata. And plus, we also know about Bhagavad Gita and Puranas. So, this is all about the religious literature. So, what are religious literature? These are the writings that are religious in context. These are writings that are religious in context and theme, and they are classified into Vedic literature and epics. In the Vedic literature, we have four Vedas: Rig Veda, Sam Veda, Yajur Veda, and Atharva Veda. And epics, we have two epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and Bhagavad Gita and Puranas are also religious literature. Now coming to secular literature, right? So secular literature is basically books or texts that are not religious, that are not religious, like books we have like Kautilya's Arthashastra. So these contain guidelines of how to run a government, how to run a government. So this is my secular literature. We've done religious literature, we have done secular literature. Secular literature is we have done books such as Kautilya's Arthashastra, right? So now we'll talk about travelers account. So number of we'll talk about travelers account. We'll also talk about little about biographics and chronicles. Fine. So number of foreign travelers. They were Greeks, they were Romans, they were Chinese, Tibetans, Arabs. So they visited India from time to time and they left valuable accounts about what? What did they written about? They left valuable accounts about the people, their lifestyles, their customs, and traditions. Right? There was a Greek ambassador, Megasthenes, This was an ambassador to the court of Chandragupta Maurya. And this person, he wrote Indica, right? Similarly, this is the first case. Similarly, there were two Chinese travelers. There were two Chinese travelers. One was named as Fahin and another was named as Hyun Sang. So they came to India to study Buddhism. And then they wrote about their experiences in India. So, chronicles, for example, we have Raja Tarangini. Raja Tarangini of Kalhana. So, it was about the kings of Kashmir from earliest times to 12th century, right? So then we have some manuscripts called Talapatras, written in Sanskrit. They were written on easily perishable material. So many have been destroyed by insects or natural calamities, but still a good number of manuscripts have survived. So some of these are preserved in temples and monasteries, right? So then we talk about oral history. This is the last topic of this part of the video. So this is also another source used by the historians, and it refers to the historical records that are based on the personal experience, personal experiences and opinions of the speaker. For example, folk tales, songs, myths, right? So these are usually handed over from generation to generation, orally or by word of mouth. Fine, so these are the sources of ancient Indian history. We discussed about two groups of sources: archaeological sources, in which we discussed about artifacts, monuments, coins, inscriptions. We also discussed about the literary sources, in which we discussed about the religious literature, secular literature, biographies, travelers' accounts, and chronicles. So this is all for this video. In the next part, part 3, I'll be discussing about the geographical location, and then we'll start with the back exercises of the chapter. So hope to see you in the next video. Do not forget to subscribe my channel School Success, and do press a like button if you like the videos. For more such contents, uh, kindly keep updated. Thank you so much.